Till now, we have seen the meaning and the origin of the non-aligned movement, as well as understood what the various factors are behind the rise of the non-aligned movement. Now let us look at this rise itself, or let us look at the growth of the non-aligned movement. Now we have seen how the idea of non-alignment as well as the word non-alignment itself came from India. Not only that, the very movement initiated from India itself, and that happened in the Asian Relations Conference of 1947. The Asian Relations Conference sowed the seeds of the non-aligned movement. Now we can see a glimpse of this conference where Jawaharlal Nehru is sitting right next to Mahatma Gandhi. So the Asian Relations Conference of 1947, which is known as the first Asian Relations Conference, was convened by India in New Delhi in the year 1947. Therefore, we understand that this particular conference was convened at a time when India was still under colonial subjugation of Britain. Now, this conference was organized by the interim government of India, headed by the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, and he was a very important contributor to this particular conference's success. So therefore, this conference was convened by Jawaharlal Nehru in New Delhi in 1947, and it brought delegates from all corners of Asia to attend it. We can see over here Mahatma Gandhi giving a speech at the Asian Relations Conference. This conference marked the entry of India in the international political sphere, as well as had the purpose of showing the world that Asia can be united, and for too long Asia has been neglected and has been considered an afterthought when it comes to world politics. This is a new Asia, as Jawaharlal Nehru himself said, and this Asia would no longer tolerate any form of subjection of the imperialist powers and would fight for its independence. Therefore, this particular conference not only brought together many Asian countries, many of them which are still fighting for independence, but it also gave a statement to the world that Asia is now united and has cooperation of itself. We can see over here many delegates of this particular conference posing for a photograph. Now, what the Asian Relations Conference started, the Bandung Conference took it forward. The Bandung Conference of 1955 is a very important milestone in the journey of the creation of the non-aligned movement. Over here we see a glimpse of the various countries that participated in the Bandung Conference. The Bandung Conference was in fact the first large-scale Asia-Africa conference. So we understand that not only were Asian nations involved in it, as was the case for the Asian Relations Conference, but in case of the Bandung Conference, even African countries were brought in the mix. This therefore took the process ahead from the Asian Relations Conference and also expanded the reach of the upcoming non-aligned movement. Now this particular conference was held in April 1955 at Bandung, which is in Indonesia, and it was hosted by the Indonesian President Ahmed Sukhanu. Now we can see a picture of Ahmed Sukhanu over here, and we already recognize him as we know that he is a founding father of the non-aligned movement. Over here we see Sukarno posing for a picture at the Bandung Conference with the other founders of the non-aligned movement, namely Nehru, Nkrumah, Nasser and Tito. In fact, Nehru also played a very important role in this conference, and India was also one of the co-hosts at the Bandung Conference. The Bandung Conference was attended by 29 Asian and African countries, which at that time made up for 54% of the world's population. Now, in this map, we see some of the attending countries as well as the host countries. We already mentioned that this particular conference was hosted by Indonesia alongside India, Pakistan, Myanmar and Sri Lanka. And the attending countries included some countries such as the Philippines, then we have Turkey, then we have Libya, and most importantly, China. Now this question might come to your mind, that what was China, a communist country, doing at a conference which led to the formation of the non-aligned movement? Wasn't China a part of the Soviet bloc? It indeed was. And how was it not against the principles of the non-aligned movement? This is because non-alignment is not outright hatred for the members of both blocs of the Cold War. China at this point of time pursued a policy of peaceful coexistence with other nations and also recognized and respected the fact that all these attending nations are pursuing a policy of non-alignment. And therefore, China attended this conference, and not only that, the Premier of China, Zhou Enlai, himself presided upon this conference, which brought it much amounts of success and relevance. We can see a picture over here where Zhou Enlai is sitting and many delegates are pouring over him to get an autograph. Zhou Enlai was a very recognizable and popular figure in politics at this point of time, and China itself was the leading power in this region. And therefore, the presence of China as an attending nation made the Bandung Conference into a success. More than the conference itself, its outcome gives it more significance. At the Bandung Conference, India and China upheld an agreement which they had signed previously, and this agreement contained the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which is also known as Panchsheel. Now, the agreement containing these 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, or Panchsheel, was then discussed in the conference, and a modified version of it was adopted as the outcome document of the Bandung Conference, or a form of a 10-point principle of the conference, and this was adopted unanimously by all the attending and the hosting nations of this particular conference. This particular modified version of this agreement later became integral to the non-alignment movement itself, as we will see. But what exactly was the Panchsheel, or these 5 principles of mutual coexistence? Well, to understand this, we have to first understand the situation of Asia in the 1950s. By the 1950s, Cold War had reached its height, and in fact the world had been divided into 2 parts by various military alliances such as NATO and Warsaw Pact in case of Europe. You can see this picture over here where we can understand the division of Europe due to Cold War. The part in red refers to the Eastern Bloc under the leadership of the Soviet Union, and the part in blue refers to the Western Bloc under the leadership of USA. However, at this time, the Cold War bloc politics was not just restricted to Europe alone, and it had also spread to Asia and Africa. In the picture over here, we can see a very similar image where the Cold War in Asia is clearly visible. The countries in red are a part of the Communist bloc under the leadership of Soviet Union, and the countries in blue are a part of the Capitalist bloc under the leadership of USA. Now, over here we see India is practically sandwiched between the 2 blocks of Cold War. And again, it was facing the same dilemma: what to do and how to stay non-aligned. In this situation, India decided to make a peaceful understanding with its next door neighbor, China, which was a part of the Soviet bloc. Now, how did India do so? By having an understanding with China, did India join the Soviet bloc? Absolutely not, as non-alignment allows for having a nation having understandings as long as it's for national interest and as long as it does not involve any military alliances. Clearly, this understanding was not based on military alliances, and also there was no clause of India joining any bloc, and therefore this agreement was purely on the grounds of peaceful coexistence. So in this context, therefore, India along with China proclaimed the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, or the Panchsheel principles. These principles they achieved in the Sino-Indian Agreement of 1954. So we understand that the Panchsheel principles took birth in the Sino-Indian Agreement of 1954. Now, what is the meaning of Panchsheel? The word Panch refers to 5 and Sheel refers to principles. So it refers to 5 principles of something. In particular, these 5 principles are the 5 principles of moral conduct as had been laid down. Of because Lord Buddha himself did not come down to take a part in the Sino-Indian agreement, and also the principles that he laid down were not specifically meant for maintaining relations between nations, but the principles that he did put forward, which were the principles of moral conduct, acted as an ethical code. And what kind of relations between nations do not rely on the code of ethics? And therefore these principles of moral conduct of Lord Buddha became the inspiration for nations to conduct their foreign policy, and therefore the 5 principles of moral conduct, as has been laid down by Lord Buddha himself, became the inspiration for nations to conduct their foreign policy and to also mutually maintain peace. Now, isn't it incredible how the teachings of our ancient philosophers still acts as the base for modern politics? Let us look at what these 5 principles of Panchsheel actually are. First principle refers to nations having mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity as well as sovereignty. Now, most conflicts often start as border clashes, where one nation does not respect the territorial integrity of another. That is why Panchsheel upholds the principle of mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and also respecting the sovereignty of each and every nation. Now the next principle is that of non-aggression. The best example for this is India itself. India is built on the principle of non-violence, and therefore India had never taken the first strike when it comes to any conflict. Whenever a nation had tried to show aggression to India, India had tried to diplomatically deal with it till the very end. As long as it is possible, India had not taken up arms. And that is the principle which Panchsheel also puts forward. The next principle is that of equality and mutual benefits. Whenever a nation is interacting with the other, they should treat each and every nation as equals, and therefore they should be interacting with them for the pursuit of having mutual benefits, and in no way should try to have more benefits than the other and should not refer to the other as inferiors. The next principle is that of non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries. Now, non-interference in the internal affairs of a nation, as you can understand, refers to the inner workings of the government of a country, one which does not require the intervention of other nations. Other nations therefore should not intervene or poke their noses in these internal affairs, and definitely should not instigate any rebellious elements of another nation for their own benefit. The final principle, and the most important, is that of peaceful coexistence. Coexistence here refers to the simultaneous existence of various nations and also various forms of governments, and this coexistence should be done on peaceful or amicable grounds. There is no need for the establishment of a right government and a wrong government, and therefore there is also no superior nation or an inferior nation, and all nations should be coexisting with each other, should be working with each other to achieve and maintain peace. These are all the principles, or the 5 principles of Panchsheel. Now, the initiation undertaken by the Asian Relations Conference, as well as the immense success of the Bandung Conference, already led to the inception of the idea of the non-aligned movement. But the non-aligned movement officially took its birth at the Belgrade Conference of 1961. We can see over here the glimpse of the Belgrade Conference. This conference was held at Belgrade, which is in Yugoslavia, in the year 1961, and this was considered to be the first summit of the non-alignment movement. Now, can you answer this question? When was the Belgrade Conference held? Was it in the year 1960, 1947, 1961, or 1965? The correct answer is 1961. The Belgrade Conference was hosted by Josip Broz Tito. Now, alongside him, Jawaharlal Nehru and also President Nasser of Egypt acted as co-hosts. Over here we see a picture of Tito, Nasser and Nehru. This conference was attended by 28 nations from Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, as well as Latin America. So you can see in this map the various observer as well as the participating nations. Not only did the birth of non-alignment take place in this movement, it also expanded into many regions of the world and truly became a representative of the third world itself. In fact, the conference acted as the third world response to the Cold War threat at that point of time, and the response was a call for non-alignment. That is why the Belgrade Conference is often called the Third World's Yalta. If you remember, the Yalta Conference was a conference which took place at the end of the Second World War under the behest of the Allied nations which won the Second World War, and they put forward a roadmap for the post-war reconstruction and development of the world. And also the Yalta Conference saw the birth of the United Nations Organization. Similarly, the Belgrade Conference brought together many third world nations and then led to the formation of the non-aligned movement. That is why it is often known as the Third World's Yalta. Now, a 27-point declaration was adopted by all the members of this conference as the outcome document of the Belgrade Conference. Let us see what this 27-point declaration was all about. This declaration recognized the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence or the Panchsheel as the basis of the relations between all non-aligned nations. It also condemned imperialism, colonialism and racism in all forms prevailing in the various parts of the globe. It also made an appeal to the superpower nations of both the blocs, which is USA and USSR, to maintain peace and security in the world. And finally, it called for the social, economic as well as cultural progress of the underdeveloped countries. So quite simply put, the 27-point declaration put forward the various objectives of the non-alignment movement, which we will be seeing in the subsequent lecture. Now, what started at the Belgrade Conference is still ongoing, and the non-aligned movement took up various roles as it continued through the decades. This it did to the summits of the non-aligned movement. The first summit of the non-aligned movement was the Belgrade Conference itself. But after that, the non-aligned member nations met after every 3 years in a summit at a particular member nation country. So as these summits took place through the various decades, each decade was characterized by a certain set of significance. Let's look at the significance of these summits. In the 1960s, the summits of the non-aligned movement focused on decolonization, disarmament, condemnation of racial discrimination, and also focused upon the peaceful settlement of disputes. Moving on to the 1970s, we see non-aligned movement focusing on the condemnation of the various multinational corporations and also the way they exploit various underdeveloped nations. And also, NAM is putting forward the idea of setting up a new international economic order, or an NIEO. Then in the 1980s, NAM focused upon the prohibition of nuclear weapons, the creation of a new international information and communication order, or an NIICO, through which better spread of information takes place all around the world. In the 1990s, NAM summits focused upon establishing better terms of trade and also facilitating aid for the developing nations, as well as looking into the reforms of existing economic institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF. At the same time, international terrorism became a very focusing issue after the 9/11 incident, and also NAM led the fight against international terrorism itself. Finally, from 2000 until this date, NAM has been particularly focusing on the peaceful settlements of international issues such as the Iraq issue, the Palestine issue, as well as having zero tolerance towards terrorism, and also leading the movement for a reformation of the United Nations Security Council. We saw while discussing the Security Council how the concept of a veto might cause deadlocks, and that is something the NAM also tries to reform alongside other functions and structure of the Security Council itself. So we can understand through the various topics of focus for the NAM summits what the significance of these summits were like. And we will be looking at what NAM had been able to achieve in these fields in the subsequent lectures. The movement, which started with only 29 member nations, now stands with a strength of 120 nations, which are member countries, and countless other observer nations. This shows the true relevance as well as the significance of the non-aligned movement. So in this lesson, we were able to trace the growth of the non-aligned movement itself. In the subsequent lesson, we will be looking at the various objectives of the non-aligned movement. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.